Welcome to AiTales, the channel where AI meets storytelling. Our goal is to push the boundaries of storytelling by incorporating the latest advances in artificial intelligence technology. We use AI to create immersive and interactive stories that blur the lines between reality and fiction. With our unique approach, you'll experience stories like never before, with personalized narratives that adapt to your choices and preferences. So join us on this exciting journey as we explore the possibilities of AI-powered storytelling. Welcome to AiTales. And let us begin. In the bustling city of New York, amidst the chaos and bright lights of Times Square, there was a shadowy underworld that few knew about. It was the world of the Japanese Mafia, also known as the Yakuza. They operated in the shadows, their activities shrouded in mystery, and their power unmatched. For years, the Yakuza had been quietly establishing themselves in New York. They started out small, with just a handful of members, but they were cunning and resourceful. They knew how to make money, and they knew how to protect themselves. Before long, their influence had spread throughout the city, and they had established themselves as a force to be reckoned with. The leader of the Yakuza in New York was a man named Tatsuo Nakamura. He was a formidable figure, with a sharp mind and a ruthless streak. He had come to America as a young man, seeking his fortune in the land of opportunity. But he soon realized that the real money was to be made in crime. Under Nakamura's leadership, the Yakuza had become the dominant criminal organization in New York. They controlled the drug trade, and the gambling industry, and even had their fingers in the world of high finance. But despite their success, Nakamura knew that they were always vulnerable. They were outsiders in a strange land, and they had many enemies. One of those enemies was the Italian Mafia. The two organizations had been at odds for years, each vying for control of the city's criminal underworld. It was a tense and uneasy truce, with occasional flare-ups of violence. But for the most part, they stayed out of each other's way. That all changed one fateful night when a young Yakuza member was found dead in a back alley. He had been shot multiple times, and his body was mutilated beyond recognition. Nakamura knew immediately that the Italians were behind it. It was a message, a warning that they were not to be messed with. Nakamura was furious. He called an emergency meeting of his top lieutenants, and they spent the night strategizing. They knew that they couldn't let the Italians get away with this. They had to retaliate, and they had to do it in a way that would send a message. The next day, Nakamura summoned the head of the Italian Mafia to a meeting. They met in a neutral location, a small cafe in the heart of Little Italy. Nakamura was calm and collected, but his eyes burned with anger. "I know what you did," he said, his voice cold and measured. "And I'm here to tell you that it won't be tolerated." The Italian boss, a burly man named Vito, shrugged. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said, his voice thick with an Italian accent. Nakamura leaned forward. "Don't insult my intelligence," he said. "You know damn well what I'm talking about. You killed one of my men, and now you're going to pay." Vito snorted. "And what are you going to do about it?" he said, his eyes narrowing. Nakamura smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "You'll see," he said. With that, he stood up and left the cafe. His lieutenants followed him out, and they disappeared into the city's shadows. For the next few weeks, there was an uneasy peace between the Yakuza and the Italians. But it was just a matter of time before the situation exploded. It happened one night in a crowded nightclub in Midtown. The Yakuza had arranged a meeting with one of their suppliers, a man who had been getting sloppy with his deliveries. As they sat at their private table, sipping on expensive whiskey, a group of Italian gangsters barged in, and guns were drawn. They had come to take out the Yakuza, once and for all. The room erupted into chaos. Tables were overturned, glasses shattered, and people screamed and ran for cover. But Nakamura and his men were prepared. They had been waiting for this moment. In a matter of seconds, the room was filled with the sound of gunfire. Nakamura and his men were outnumbered, but they were skilled fighters. They dodged and weaved between the tables, taking out their enemies with deadly accuracy. As the smoke cleared, the Yakuza emerged victorious. The Italians lay dead or dying on the floor, and the Yakuza suffered only a few minor injuries. Nakamura stood at the center of the room, his eyes blazing with triumph. But he knew that this was only the beginning. The Italians would not take this lying down. They would retaliate, and they would do so with force. Nakamura was right. The Italians launched a series of attacks on the Yakuza in the weeks that followed. There were bombings, shootings, and even a few kidnappings. It seemed that the war between the two criminal organizations was never going to end. But Nakamura was determined to come out on top. He rallied his men, and they fought back with everything they had. They were smart and resourceful, and they managed to avoid most of the attacks. And when they did get hit, they hit back twice as hard. The war raged on for months, with no end in sight. But finally, after a particularly brutal attack that left several Yakuza members dead, Nakamura decided that enough was enough. He called a meeting with Vito, the head of the Italian Mafia, and they sat down to talk. It was a tense and uncomfortable meeting, but in the end, they managed to agree. The Yakuza would stay out of the Italians' territory, and in exchange, the Italians would leave the Yakuza alone. It was a fragile peace, but it held. In the years that followed, the Yakuza continued to operate in New York, but they did so with more caution. They knew that they were always at risk, always in danger of being taken down by their enemies. But they were smart and resourceful, and they managed to stay one step ahead. And Nakamura, the ruthless leader of the Yakuza in New York, remained at the helm. He was a feared and respected figure, a man who had proven himself in battle. He knew that the world of crime was always changing, always evolving, but he was determined to stay ahead of the curve. And so the Yakuza continued to thrive in New York, operating in the shadows, always watching, always waiting. They were a force to be reckoned with, a power that few dared to challenge. And they would remain so for years to come. Thank you for watching this video. We hope you've enjoyed the tale we've shared and that it has captured your imagination and taken you on a journey. If you enjoyed our content, please consider liking and sharing the video to help spread the word and support our channel. Thank you again for watching, and we'll see you soon for more mesmerizing tales.